Great. Thank you all for watching that with us. We are now going to have, I'm going to invite Stan Sherer as well as Dylan Gaffney, who's a local history specialist at the library, to join me for a Q&A session. You can put questions in the chat, and Molly will read them out to us, and so we'll see how that goes. And we can also just unmute and take questions that way as well. I will just say that Elise Bernier-Feely, who's featured in the film, is well, and we wish she could be here with us tonight. Her internet access is limited, but she has a copy of the film, and will be is still very much a presence at the library, although we've been working hard to make sure everyone stays safe during this time.
Yeah, so if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or raise your hand. If you raise your hand, please do it through Zoom, because I'm not going to be able to see everybody. I do have a couple of questions to get started while people are busy chatting, putting theirs in the chat. And the first one is for Stan. Why did you want to make this documentary about Forbes?
Well, first of all, you have to understand, I love the library. I actually worked at the library in the early 1970s when the library started a media center. And I worked in the media center for a couple of years. And since then, I've really loved the library. It is one of the most vital parts of our community. And to make this film was a bit of a love song to the library, to say how much it's appreciated and how important it is for the people of this area. And the staff is just terrific, always there to help and very knowledgeable, and they're just fantastic.
That's actually a good segue. We've had somebody in the chat say how much they loved all the historic photos. And another question was all the old photos of early Forbes staff, and do we know who they were or anything else about them? And I'm just going to add to that question. Somebody else said that hearing Elise sing was worth the price of admission. And I know that we currently have a lot of musicians on staff, and I'm wondering if we've always had a lot of musicians on staff.
I don't know about the musicians on staff, I'm sure. Luckily, we do know a lot about those, the early staff that are in those wonderful pictures from the 1890s. The folks who took those pictures and then the people who accessioned them into the library collection were smart enough to write the names of the people in them on the back in pencil and occasionally pen. So that's my archivist plug, to always write names of people and pictures on the back so we can identify who they are. So we saw Mabel Winchell, Annie Prentice, Clara Clark, Norman Cornwell, John Rushford, Isabel Beers, Henry Parsons, along with Charles Cutter, who was identified there, the first director. In addition to the names on the photos, we also know a lot about early staff, partly because they did a wonderful thing, which was they kept a secret tome, which was called Forbes Corners, where they wrote poems and epitaphs and stories about one another and about their bosses, using code names for people and locations in the library. And it's this wonderful bound volume that we have in the Hampshire room. They supposedly had meetings, which I picture as these sort of like candlelit Skull and Bones style meetings down in the basement. But yeah, so that's, if you ever want to visit the Hampshire room when we're back open, it's worth looking at. It's very entertaining.
Okay, the next question is, I love the piece of art at the front of the library, which contains the date it was built or opened. Do you know anything about it or its style? I think that's maybe referring to what's above the front arch.
Yeah, Elise would be perfect to answer this question, and maybe somebody else, another of our staff members who are in the meeting would. I know it's not the date we opened. It's the date when the building was nearing completion, because it says 1893. But I don't know. It's very stylistic and interesting.
I think I've heard Elise say that it's a signature of the architect to add these little date designs to the buildings. It is beautiful, and it was harder to read. The building was cleaned when it was repointed, where the walls were crumbling. I mentioned in the film how there was some issues, and I remember coming to work one day, and I was assistant director, but the director saying, the walls are crumbling, the first 6 feet of the building is falling down, and I was just absolutely devastated. But fortunately, there's people who can fix these things, and the city came through with capital CPA funds, and I'm not remembering what that stands for right now, but really saved the day and rebuilt those walls, and then actually put mortar it back in, and cleaned the building, and then oh, there's my dog, and then everything was just beautiful. The building is just absolutely stunning.
Yeah, so Faith has let us know it's the Community Preservation Act, and yes, we are lucky they preserved our building. Oops, there's my phone. What about the role of Pliny Earl and in the early years of Forbes? And his portrait is prominently displayed at the library.
Well, Pliny Earl gave a wonderful amount of money to help establish the library and to help build the collection in the early years. In fact, early news reports will often call it the Forbes Earl Library in the 1890s when it was being built, because he played such a big role in funding its beginning. Lisa, I don't know if you know anything beyond that.
And sorry, I have just stepped away. I think we just had delivery to the door, and I'm sorry, I don't know too much, but was involved with the state hospital, correct? Yes, and amazing person. I got to hear one of Historic Northampton's talks about his role, and he's a name that I'm very proud to be affiliated with, but I'm sorry, I don't have anything to add. But that is a very good local history question, and one that we love to, that's the kind of question we love to answer, and can get back to someone about.
Okay, we have another building question. Is the rust-colored trim on the exterior of the building terracotta? Any ideas?
Sounds like a quiz show.
The stones were local? The exterior, like the sandstone part, I think.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, I think all the building materials were regional.
Okay, moving on to hopefully an easier question. With the early photos of the staff, is it true that there was a training program for librarians?
I'm not sure how formal it was. That would be another great question to dig deeper into. But there certainly were a lot of young librarians who moved on to other jobs elsewhere, who got their start at Forbes, including Cutter's own family. So it was a stepping off point.
And I'm going to thank Faith again for adding a little bit more information about the building in the chat. And our next kind of a question, more of a comment, or notice at least, is that we didn't mention anything about the Cutter classification and how special that makes us.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, there's so many things that are truly make Forbes unique, and our Cutter classification system is one of them. He was our first librarian. We brought him here when the library, even before it was going to open, the trustees at that time reached out. He was at the Boston Athenaeum, and they wanted him, and he agreed and came out, and one of his first tasks was to go to Europe on a book buying tour, I think even before the library opened. And we always joke, well, librarians these days, they don't send us to Europe on book buying tours. But he then came back and implemented his classification system, which was a competitor to Dewey, the decimal Dewey system, who has connections to Amherst. And we are one of the very few public libraries that are left using the Cutter system. Part of the Library of Congress classification system is based on his work, but very few libraries are straight Cutter. And we do have a couple of strong Cutter enthusiasts on staff, and can speak at who could speak at length about Cutter, if you were interested.
Okay, the next question is, has there been any federal funding offered for the Coolidge Room, or is there consideration underway for that?
There was a bill that what was passed or had made some progress to look at providing funding for the non-federally funded libraries, and it never went anywhere. That was about 10 years ago, I think. At this point, I'm not aware of any program of that nature. And actually, in some ways, our independence affords us a lot of discretion in terms of how we approach the museum. The NARA program, which is the government body that oversees the federally funded libraries, I forget which recent president, excuse me, not the only local president, which recent president has elected not even to join the NARA system to afford themselves the independence that we have as a result of that. All that being said, the federal funding would be quite lovely. I think if we are, I sort of allude to in the film some hopes that we have for that space. The space is very much the same exhibit cases and a lot of the same furnishings that have been there, that Grace Coolidge actually helped pick out some of those furnishings. And so we have hopes to modernize the museum to the extent that we could have some interactive displays, let's say, or just more, if you've been to a museum recently, you'll see, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And I think if there was an effort for a project of that nature, that we would be able to find hopefully one-time funding for something of that nature.
And then we have, so for Stan, before you had to stop on-site filming, what else would you have liked to include in the film?
I would have liked to have spent more time with staff members. Would have liked to have heard from them. As it was, things just really came to a sudden stop. The library closed, as you know, and that was that. So we just went ahead and used what we could and talked with Lisa over Zoom, which worked out okay. Not nearly as nice as an in-person interview, but Lisa had a lot to say and really pulled the film together.
Well, that's nice of you, Stacey.
I'll add, I didn't really want to focus on patrons for a variety of reasons. The film really, for me, this was about the library and the people who make this library terrific. And of course, you need people in the library, but for one thing, it's complicated to film people coming in. You need releases, and it gets complicated. So really focusing on the people who make the library work was what I was interested in.
Well, Stan, you did a beautiful job with it. We're really grateful to have it, and this will live on in our archives, and I'm sure be used and viewed for a long time to come.
It's a record of where the library is right now in the midst of this pandemic.
So I don't see any other questions. If I missed if you had a question in the chat, oh, there just came another one. I was going to say, if I missed your question, put it in again, because I thought I got all of them. So this is from somebody who says that when they were in high school in the late 60s, they worked in the art and music department. Mr. Chapman was the director then, and a big part of their job was cutting out photos from magazines and pasting them on poster board. Teachers checked out the pasted pictures and photographs to use in their classroom. And what happened to these archives? Do we still have them? Dylan.
I don't think we have them. I don't see much like that. It's not the only thing, especially there was a lot of scrapbooking. There was a lot of collaboration with schools over the years where things were lent out and never came back. So it could have just gone by the wayside there. There's staff on the call here who have been around longer than me, but yeah, no, I do not see a lot of those in the collection. Oh, there you go.
One in the 90s, yeah.
Yeah, so one of our staff members said they were gone in the 90s when they were no longer being used. Thank you, Faith.
We have a number of formats of materials that have, we are getting new formats of things all the time, and other things that fade away. So now, any last questions? I've loved the questions that people have been asking. It's even the ones that we can't answer. This gives us other things to figure out.
Absolutely. 125 years of history is there's a lot of history there, where you can just see how the old photos and any of the archives are just such rich resources. And I want to put a plug in for the work that we're doing today to document not only the library but our community. It's going back to the bit about Harrison and sort of seeing things that are so ephemeral. They're there in the moment. They're part of something, but they're quickly disappear. And I feel like the internet has made that even more so. I mean, we're not even putting things on physical paper. So Dylan here is actually a very lead person on having us sort of move into the next phase of archives, which includes digital archiving, which is really, really interesting, and a way to make sure that we continue to document our community and have our archives reflect the who's in our community now, and that's important work for the researchers of the future. So all of this work is based on what's actually left behind for researchers to get their hands on.
We had another architecture question come in. Who designed the glass mezzanine floor?
I will say that was an add-on. I do know this much, and Elise, we need you now. This is so the building originally was open from the ground level all the way up, and then when they ran out of shelf space, they added in, I believe in the 20s, but somebody on the call can correct me if I've got that date wrong. They added in these stacks, which are load-bearing stacks, and they go up through the floor, and that glass floor is built right into them. And there's some great photos of them being installed. So while I can't answer who actually installed them, they were functional there. And during the renovation that took place just at the turn of the 20th century, from what I hear, I wasn't quite here yet at that time. A lot of those stacks went all the way across, and many of the stacks were removed to open up the first floor into the beautiful big open space that we have there, which we hope to have everyone back in not too long.
Yeah, so we thank you to all the staff for giving more details in the chat. That's wonderful. And also, I think pictures of the installation of maybe those stacks, but certainly some stacks in the library are in the timeline link that we put up there. So when we were celebrating our 125th anniversary, we put together a timeline of events, and we're still adding, or we plan to still be adding to it. I know that we have things we were going to put in there. I don't know if we've actually done that yet, but they will be updated soon. Dylan is saying that it has been updated. Great. So it is almost 8 o'clock.
All Great, great. Well, we will just to recap, in case you didn't catch it, this film will be available. Stan's very generously gave us copies to circulate. They'll be in our catalog if they're not already there, to be able to borrow. You can, part of the library is open. If you put items on hold, we'll set those aside for you, and you can come in, or we'll bring them out in various ways to get them to you. And it will also be uploading the film to YouTube, and have that available along with a recording of this Q&A session. So continue to add to the archives. And I will just make a couple of last minute plugs. One, our local history team is amazing, and love to receive questions. And if there was a question that you were hoping to get a more complete answer on, or something you didn't ask, archives at forbeslibrary.org is a great place to reach that group of folks whose knowledge is very deep and who have access to all of these great resources. And also, lastly, I want to thank everyone on the call who has contributed to Library Giving Day. I've just heard that we are almost at $7,000. This is our big online day of giving, which exceeds our $5,000 goal, and we're very, very grateful to everyone's support. That funding is really, really helpful to us. So thank you for those who have given. We're still accepting gifts if you're interested. We'll put the link in the chat there. And thank you all for coming out tonight and staying for the film and the Q&A. It's been really fun to watch this with you and share this experience. And hopefully next year we'll be able to do something in person.
And I want to say thank you again to all. It's
Thank
been
you,
a real
Stan.
pleasure.
Stan, it's such a beautiful gift. The film is lovely, and
Really a pleasure.
thank you all, and good night.
Good night, everybody.